Relations. Sandy McKay of Nicola Development Services, presenting on the Cache Creek Housing Needs Report to Council. Can you hear us okay?
Yep. Sandy, and perfect. Thanks everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yay, it worked.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks again for having me back. My name is Sandy McKay. I'm the Housing Research and Policy Lead here at Logan Development Services. I've also got my colleague Jennifer Getz on the line with us today. She was helping me with a lot of the research and engagement analysis for this study. So we've got her in case you've got any specific questions about the engagement as it relates to Cache Creek that I can't answer. So you've got both of us on the line today. So you should all have copies of the PowerPoint, but I am going to share my screen here. We'll make sure this all works. Martin, you've actually disabled participant screen sharing in your options there.
So the one that's highlighted in green?
That before, I wasn't thinking.
The one that's in green, if you click on that. And then multiple, yeah.
Should work now?
Okay, great. Looks like it's working. Yeah, it's working. Perfect. There we go. So you should all now see the first page there. Great. Okay. So thanks again for having me back. This is the final presentation and the last piece of the Cache Creek Housing Needs Report conducted through the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. Myself and Nicola Development Services and our data partners at TNRD and Partners Limited are really happy with the way this study turned out, and I'm looking forward to sharing the results of the study with you. Before we get going, I'd like to acknowledge that Nicola Development Services operates on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen, the Shwetsum, and the Wasanic peoples, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Union of BC Municipalities, through whom funding for this project is made available. So today I'm going to take sort of 10 or 15 minutes and run you through the basic findings of the report, as well as what you can expect to see in the report document itself, which has been distributed to your staff. As you all are aware, this project was done in coordination with a number of other communities across the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, including the City of Merritt, Clinton, Logan Lake, Clearwater, Sun Peaks, and all of the electoral areas save electoral area O. Merritt, as highlighted there, is an important component of the study, and we're really glad that we were able to see all of these communities combined, because it allows us to make draw some really interesting key findings on how your community is similar to or different from a lot of your neighbors. So included in this report is kind of two basic things. We're giving you the information on what is happening, so local and regional information on demography, households, incomes, economy, and affordability. And it's also who it's happening to. We've got a lot of engagement data, some affordability analysis, and an idea of which income groups or household types are struggling the most to meet their housing needs. What's not in this report is the next step that you as a council need to decide. So that's the how. That's implementation, where new housing should go, the form or density that it should take, and you decide how to act on those pieces through your OCP, through zoning bylaw updates, through partnership development, community education, et cetera, et cetera. We've actually included as an appendix to your report a housing tools guide that you can use to hopefully guide your next step through this action. There's a number of different tools in that study, some of which are more appropriate to larger centers, but there's a lot of information there for communities about the size of Cache Creek that should see you well. The report itself has 6 key components. The first is the Village of Cache Creek Housing Needs Report. That's the main document that you received in your packages. We've also included a community housing summary or profile. That's a 4-page, highly visual summary of the key themes in terms of data that we found from your community. Those two are the 2 most important documents, certainly for understanding housing needs and for communicating those housing needs to your community members. The other pieces are secondary. The first is the housing tools and policy guide that I spoke about, and that may be more useful when you're deciding how to address the findings of this report. We've also included an indicators and monitoring guide that will help you over the next 5 years maintain an understanding of your housing needs across your community, and then update this guide in 5 years when you're required to by the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs. We've also included a full engagement summary report. So if, while there is a lot of engagement from Cache Creek included in your report, the full engagement summary report may give you a more fulsome idea of what we actually asked, how we asked it, and then the full amount of responses that we received. And then finally, the sixth piece is just data tables. These are not particularly useful to you as decision makers. They're more for reference for your staff. And they're basically the way we sort of check all of the boxes that the ministry gives us. So they're our way of ensuring that no matter what, you are in compliance with all ministry requirements for this project. So now on to the key findings. This is the fun part. One of the things that I really want to make sure I highlight is that as of right now, Cache Creek is still in a relatively advantageous housing context. It's still reasonably affordable, especially to households that make moderate to above moderate incomes. And actually overall, between 2006 and 2016, a lot of the base indicators that we use improved in your community, and that's a great sign. However, there's a lot of things to keep your eye on and to be aware of. So for your renters, though generally housing conditions have improved, for renters, those conditions actually worsened. And now about a third of all of your renters are in poor housing need. Your population is definitely aging. It's something you obviously know, and it's something a lot of communities across BC are dealing with. And that is going to present a challenge for you as older adults need different types of housing to meet their needs, and often they need specialized supports as well. Rental availability continues to be a challenge, not only in Cache Creek, but in a number of communities, and the rates of rentership are increasing. And what we've seen is that housing market pressures from places like the Lower Mainland and Kamloops, though not really impacting Cache Creek yet, may be starting to do so, especially as COVID-19 pushes a number of people out of those larger centers looking for more outdoor recreation opportunities and more space in general. So this report should really encourage you to act and not to remain complacent, even though there are a lot of good things about the housing context in Porter Creek, or in Cache Creek. You have the ability to prevent sort of a housing crisis situation rather than, as a number of communities are, trying to react to one. So it's a good place to start. So digging into some of your demography, your population is relatively stable, but it is aging. We're actually predicting a 8% growth between 2016 and 2026. And that's down from about 6% decline between 2006 and 2016. But one of the interesting things about an aging population is that what it tends to happen is that household sizes decline. So as children move out of the home, as seniors maybe go from being a 2-person household to a 1-person household, there tends to be more homes needed to meet the demands of a smaller population. So what you can actually see here is that in Cache Creek, household demand is expected to be up 14% between 2006 and 2016. Over that same 20-year period, there was only about a 2% population growth. So you need many, many more homes to meet the demand of the same number of people. And that is something to keep in mind, especially for senior populations. And as you can see here in this graph, the percentage of your community that's over the age of 65 is expected to increase dramatically. On the far left, you're looking at the total of your population from 2006. In the middle is 2016, and on the far right is 2026. And you're going from basically 2006, 20% of your community being seniors or over the age of 65 to in 2026, 40% of your community. And that's fairly high for communities across the region. It comes with a lot of challenges for your housing market, and it comes with a need to adapt and change your housing to suit that population better. Across the study, many residents, especially older residents, worried about their ability to maintain larger properties and expressed concern that they were unable to downsize because of either the cost of those new units that are smaller or the availability of units, which to us highlights a real need for affordable and accessible housing, particularly rental housing, affordable home care and semi-supported or supported options that people need as they age. And then a big piece of this is housing closer to amenities and services. So understanding that there are limited interregional transit options, but those that are there tend to be clustered around the existing services. It's good to increase sort of those multi-family, multi-unit housing options closer to those service centers in your community. So around your active and public transportation hubs where they exist, and closer to your sort of downtown core. What we've also found is that seniors are often looking for smaller homes, though not necessarily fewer bedrooms. That is a big piece of this, is seniors not wanting to maintain a large property, not interested in looking after a large house, but still wanting 2 or sometimes even 3 bedrooms because they want to be able to have their grandkids and kids over. They want to have the ability to have, an office or a craft crew, things like that. That's really important to people. So prioritizing decisions to increase the number of multi-unit offerings, but also maintaining sort of a larger bedroom number. And there's a quote here from a resident of Cache Creek saying that the elderly need a place to go when you need palliative care in terms of home care aid. Too many places don't have access to ground level apartments for the elderly with mobility concerns. And this is reflective of something we saw across the region. Folks, as they get older, are really concerned about the lack of rental options, and especially the lack of rental options that are accessible to them with the containment supports that they need. And as I mentioned, the number of renters is increasing across the region, not just in Cache Creek. And renters are actually much less likely to be able to meet their needs than owners are. So looking at this graph, what we're showing you is across the TNRD rates of rentership and different age cohorts. And the big things that I want to point out to you are looking at these 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19 age categories, and then again at 30 to about 50. These are the places where we're seeing the largest jumps in rentership, where people are renting more frequently than they have in the past. And so these are tend to be the children of these parents aged 30 to 50. So it's younger families. The largest jumps in rates of rentership are in families with school-aged children. So what we're seeing is more people with younger children renting at greater frequencies. We've also seen that, looking at these household incomes down here, the median household income in Cache Creek is about $57,000. The owner household income is a lot higher, $65,000, and renters only earn about $27,000 a year. A huge difference in your ability to meet your housing needs, whether you're a renter or an owner. Both renters and owners are up about 10 households over the past census period from 2006 to 2016. So rates of rentership, though only up the same as the amount of owners, they're increasing at a much faster rate over that same period. And rental housing is harder to find and becoming more expensive as well. Unfortunately, we only have data on the rental market for the TNRD as a whole, which includes Kamloops, and that's not a great indicator of rental health in Cache Creek. But what we've heard through our engagement is that vacancy continues to be very low. And for the metrics that we have, it tends at less than 2%. But in engagement, we've heard that it can be far lower, especially in a community like Cache Creek with limited rental options. So what we're seeing in this graph is that prices are escalating steadily, even after being adjusted for inflation. Most units are up between 5 and 10%. And that these numbers actually very, very likely underestimate the cost on the open market. They include the entire rental market, not just what's available for rent on a site like Kijiji or Facebook, things like that. So more renters, more family renters renting at higher rates is the sort of takeaway. And that impacts a lot of different things, including the ability of employers to attract and retain workers in key industries. It's not just tourism, it's not just retail. We're hearing this from construction workers, from teachers, nurses, and even from municipal workers across the region. This is directly from Cache Creek, someone saying that they were unable to fill a position in Ashcroft, Cache Creek area because they couldn't find a place for the qualified candidate to live. They had to trim the position down. It was a high-paying, great position within the hospital. And then a couple more people saying that they don't know if they can wait 5 years and we're in a crisis situation, we have to move fast. There's a shortage of rentals. Rent is extremely high in price. People are living in RVs. Some people are rent poor and can't afford other basic needs just to have a place to stay. And that's not uncommon to hear in the engagement. So for us, this highlights a need for more dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options, how this need for housing for workers in key industries, as well as for families and individuals. And sort of the way forward is actually pretty similar to how you address the needs for your aging population. Prioritizing purpose-built rentals, looking at policies that maybe expand the ability to put suites or infill in certain areas, protecting your existing rental stock where you can, and then some more sort of technical terms that are maybe not super appropriate for the village of Cache Creek, but maybe at some point it could be more appropriate, looking at things like pre-zoning if you're doing some OCP review, looking at inclusionary zoning, so mandating that there's certain affordability requirements that go into different areas, and restricting conversions, things like that. But those are less important than just getting more rental units and working with your nonprofit and for-profit development communities to build those units. And it's not just rental housing. Owner housing is more expensive too. We've seen that the median house price has steadily risen across the region, and that's no different in Cache Creek. In Cache Creek, even after adjusting for inflation, the cost of ownership has gone up about 37% in the past 10 years. And 2019 was actually your largest sales year by volume in a decade. You sold 32 properties in 2019, and we would expect that 2020 would have a similar high frequency of sales, as many people have reported folks leaving areas like Vancouver or Kamloops looking for more space, looking for that rural lifestyle. So all these things combined, we're seeing is that the market is becoming harder for low to middle low income earners, and especially for staying income households. And people are having to stay in that rental unit longer in order to afford what is an increasingly high rate of ownership. So just to highlight that from some of the engagement across our survey, which included participants from across the region, 34% of all respondents indicated that their current housing was unaffordable. When we asked just renters, that number jumped to 65% of the renter respondents. And we had a pretty good response rate. There were well over 300 people who responded to the survey. So that is, obviously it's not a scientific survey, but it is important to listen to those stats and look at some of these quotes when we're also comparing them with the numbers that we're seeing from places like the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The biggest concern that survey respondents had over the next 5 years were the cost of utilities, the cost of maintaining their home, the physical ability to maintain their home. So those are speaking to often older residents who had those concerns, as well as the distances to services and amenities were a big one as well. So another couple of quotes here. I have struggled and know many others in the area who have struggled because of our housing problems. Something needs to be done before more families in Kiddo struggle or continue to struggle. Please do something. And all of these quotes in this PowerPoint are directly from residents of Cache Creek. I made sure to pull only Cache Creek quotes for this PowerPoint. So the kind of long and the short of that situation is that there's a real need for more of the housing that's being offered at below market rates. And often those are facilitated or done through nonprofit developments. We often call these non-market supportive or emergency housing options. Looking at the BC housing waitlist, there are limited applicants in Cache Creek, but we have seen an increase of the numbers of people living or staying with family and friends. Often we call that hidden homelessness. So they're folks without a stable place to live, but who have a support structure that is supporting them for now. We also saw many respondents reporting unsafe housing conditions, poor housing conditions, and a general increase in worry and stress related to housing insecurity. A couple of quotes here. I once visited a rundown hotel where people living long-term, such an unpleasant environment that I never want to go back. And this last one, housing for minimum wage persons in Cache Creek is impossible to find. So again, similar quotes from folks there. So this highlights for us a need for more dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options. So improving that the availability of rental options in the market, but as well looking at some of those alternative tenure models. So we often call these things housing that's affordable in perpetuity or secured affordable housing. So that's usually funding housing that is secured through nonprofit operations or through a grant from BC Housing or through an operations budget from BC Housing. So what that means is that you need increased funding from senior government. This is not just on the local government, it's not just at the municipal level. There needs to be senior government support as well. And nonprofits are often the best operators to provide these services. And I know in Cache Creek you've got a committed nonprofit community who are looking at developing seniors housing. But there's ways you can help as a local government, including educating your community to reduce stigma around supported uses or affordable uses. You can look at things like a land acquisition and disposal strategy that prioritizes disposal to nonprofit entities looking to develop housing. You can prioritize nonprofit development applications. I imagine your staff are probably already actively doing that, but it's always helpful to take if a nonprofit development application comes in, just pull it from the bottom of the pile and put it right on the top. Nonprofits often deal with really, really tight turnarounds on grant applications and things like that, so it's very helpful. And you can explore incentive policies, you can encourage and support nonprofit development throughout the needs. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with today is rates of core housing need by household type and by Indigenous identity. So this is our way of highlighting some of the disproportionately affected groups in your community, those who are in the most need of support from local and senior government and from service providers across the region. So looking at the far left, we're seeing total rates of core housing need, and about 13% of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District is in core housing need. 23% of Indigenous households are in core housing need, and only 11% of non-Indigenous households. So obviously there's a higher prevalence of core housing need for Indigenous households. This is almost exclusively accounting for Indigenous households that are within the boundaries of a municipality, not living on reserve. And then you can see here the next two, families with children and families without children. They have some of the lowest rates of core housing needs across the region. And that's because typically families have usually either two income sources, so both parents working, or if only one parent is working, typically the other parent is taking on a lot of the responsibilities at home that allow that the second parent to earn more in their career and access higher earning potential in their career. So the next two, though, are places where we're really seeing folks struggling. Lone parents, 30% of all lone parents across the regional district are struggling. That number does not go down very much for non-Indigenous lone parents and is very high, above 50% for Indigenous lone parents. And for singles and roommates, which is a category that's really increasing as it represents a lot of older residents, that number is still really high, 22% across the region, and 30% for Indigenous singles or roommates, and 21% for non-Indigenous singles. So that's where you can sort of see who needs the most help in your community. And that's it. The next steps for this project, we'll be looking for a council resolution to adopt the study. I'm sure your CEO, Martin, has prepared that for you already. We'll also be offering a staff training session in cooperation with the TNRD. Initially, it was supposed to be in March, but it sounds like the TNRD would like to wait until we can get everyone there in person, so it may be closer to the summer when we do that. And similarly with the community forum, we'll be releasing this study publicly and inviting everyone who participated and who would like to hear more information to come to a public event, hopefully in person, but it may have to be online depending on scheduling and restrictions from the Ministry of Health. And with that, I will just say thank you. Thank you to our partners across the region who participated in the study or shared lived experience or helped distribute our survey. And thank you to the regional district and of course Martin at the Village of Cache Creek for being a stable partner throughout this process. We had a lot of transition and movement from a lot of the local governments, and he was there the entire time, and it was great to have just one face to talk to. It was really helpful. That is it. I am happy to take any questions you've got, and you should feel free to reach out to me at any time as you review the study. I'm happy to take any questions if you don't have them now, over email or over the phone in the next coming months. But we'll stop sharing, and if you've got questions, please feel free to ask them.
Any questions for Mr. McKay?
You mentioned earlier that there are several steps to follow once the report has been adopted. Maybe you could outline those for us, what the province is requiring, how often we have to submit these reports to the province?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. So the Housing Needs Reports legislation that was introduced in 2019 specified that you had to do your first version of the report before 2022, which is a really good idea, and I'm glad that we had to do them quite early. But unfortunately, there is a census that's being done this year in 2021. So usually census data takes a year to a year and a half to be released after the census is finished. So we're not expecting any of that data to show up until sort of 2023 at the earliest. So what you're going to notice in this report is that that means that a lot of the census data we're using is from the last census, 2016. There are a number of data sources that we can use to supplement the data, and as well engagement is always the most up-to-date data you can have. But the next sort of housing needs report that you do, what we're recommending is that you time it for the release of the next census data. That way you've got the most up-to-date information possible when you do your study. So the ministry is mandating that you do your first one before 2023, and then at least one every 5 years thereafter. So it's going to become a really foundational policy document for you. So our suggestion is rather than wait 5 years to do your next one, wait, say 2.5 years maybe, until that 2023 time when the full slate of census information is released. Then do your next one, housing needs report, and then get on your 5-year cycle. So you're always doing your housing needs report as soon as the latest census data becomes available. That way you've got the most up-to-date information possible. The requirements that you have to fulfill are fairly, there was a lot of funding available for this project, so we have gone above and beyond the requirements of the ministry in order to set you a pretty concrete baseline from which you can work. In the future, I don't imagine that your staff will have to do quite as much as we've done here. So what we've actually done is build out a data tool and a full presentation that outlines where you get all the data that you need, how to download it and clean it, and then how to enter that new data into this data tool to generate all of the graphs that you've seen throughout this presentation. So at that staff training session, we'll be walking everyone through it, showing everyone how to use that tool, and then going over the sort of minutia of the requirements that you as decision makers don't necessarily need to know, but your staff, either as the folks who are going to have to do the next version of the study or write the RFP for the consultant that comes in and does it, they will need to know that information. So the goal is to leave you in the best possible place so that in 3 years or in 5 years, whenever you choose to do it, you can leverage what may be fewer resources coming from EBCM to complete this study and maybe even do it internally.
Anything further? Thank you, Mr. McKay, and acknowledge the regional district's effort in coordinating the studies for the different electoral areas in the municipalities, I assume. And Cache Creek is in a good position because of the rural environment that we have, and we're looking forward to growth and putting the report to good use as we grow. And it's nice to have something that we have a solid foundation as we start to plan out our growth in our community. We must have growth. So this is a good tool for us to move forward with, and I thank you for that.
Thank you very much for having me, and as I said, feel free over the next few months or even as you start digging back into this report in a few years from now to just drop me an email. I'm happy to help. Our involvement with your community does not end with the end of this project. We're happy to be partners with you for the long haul.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Still with us, Lisa?
Uh-oh.
Yes, sorry, I had my speaker much out, so you didn't hear me coughing.
Business arising from delegations that let be sent to Mr. McKay, thanking him for the presentation.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Do we want a resolution to accept the report at this point, or
Pardon me?
do we need a resolution to accept the report at this point, or are we going to,
We could do that. I did not prepare one as Mr. McKay suggested because I wanted to make sure that there were no glitches the council wanted to be corrected for in the report. I've also, at Mr. McKay's suggestion, only put the body of the report and that one appendix in there. I do have 2 copies of the full report. I did not know whether anyone on council wanted to go through the full report before doing that resolution. So we can do it tonight, but my plan was to have it on the next agenda for adoption.
Okay.
Makes sense. It's interesting and it's very informative. It's just unfortunate that the information is so, for the
Yeah.
most part of it, that we know there's been substantial changes since 2016, both
Mhm.
up and down through the years, so.
Absolutely. I mean, the landfill closed that year and it affected
Everything, yeah.
everything in Fair
Everything
Street.
since,
The
yeah.
decline in population,
Yeah.
the decline and then COVID, of course, has had a huge effect with some of our local employers as well, so. Unemployment rates and those kinds of things, so.
Yeah.
We have a few bright spots coming up though, especially the big Fulcrum development, because their housing is going to be right in that sweet spot that he
Mhm.
mentioned. So it will be smaller houses, and the price range fits what they were talking about.
You're going great guns. My house vibrates daily. Alana's dog likes it better at my house than her house in the daytime because it makes the whole ground shakes down there. So, but the neighborhood is all really excited about it, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. We have been getting a few, sorry, this is outside the agenda, so. No.
Committee of the whole, we can have a general discussion.
Basically, we have been getting very few, but a couple of complaints about the amount of dust that's being
Yes.
raised on the streets. So I did have a conversation with the developer who had a conversation with their contractor, and they're going to be doing whatever, as much as they can.
At this time
When
of
it's
year, it's kind
freezing.
of difficult though because
Yeah.
if you water the land, then you have ice packs, then the residents are still walking up the side part of the road to use the trails that they've always used for walking on. But yeah, it would create dangerous circumstances, I would think, if they tried to ice it in this weather.
Yeah, yeah. Anything they do to wet it down to keep the dust down is just going to freeze.
Yeah.
Mother Nature's looking after that for us the last couple of
Today, yeah, for sure.
Okay, committee reports, economic development, Councillor Peters and Councillor Coomber.
Nothing for me at this point.
No, no.
Budget and administrative services, Councillor Peters and Councillor Coomber.
I would just like to see the employee and council expenses and fire department expenses put on the next COW if we could, to get that one off the
The
books.
next community.
The next community of the whole for discussion and perhaps adoption.
Okay,
We'll
Sorry,
have to meet and
the council, staff, and fire department
expenses. yeah.
expenses.
We got to a point and then we kind of, floods happened and other things happened and it kind of got dropped off the radar. I would like to see it brought back.
Are you talking about like travel expenses or
That whole, we had,
wages and benefits and all of that?
no, the policy that it's, hang on, I'll give you the,
Oh, you want the policy to come back?
yes,
Okay, okay, good.
yes.
Oh, no, not the policy.
Policy and bylaw review,
Oh, excuse me, sorry, just wanted to give council some information under the budget and administrative
Okay.
services if I could.
my apologies.
I should have jumped in sooner. Christine is not here tonight because of the roads in and out of their place are rather treacherous, and she wanted to make sure she was traveling that during daylight. However, the main reason that I wanted to bring this up was that she's telling me that the auditors will actually be doing the audit this week. And once that is done, it may go partway into next week. As soon as that is over, she'll be getting back on the annual budget.
Hopefully they won't need quite as much information this year, having done it 2 years already now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah.
Thank you. Policy and bylaw review, myself and Councillor Peters.
Nothing for me.
Your policy, okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
can I ask that when Councillor Peters speak up? I can't hear her very well.
Oh, sorry, that's a new one. I have nothing.
You
want me to put it into the middle?
Move it to, back onto the chair?
Yeah,
Centralize it.
you do it like that, it should catch all of us. Just pull it across Santa's neck, that's okay. There, we put you in more in the middle.
I'm trying to balance Gareth's little microphone here so that you can actually pick up all of this.
I'll grab some tape after this.
There we go. I think that's a little bit better. All right, just wanted to confirm with Councillor Defoe, can you hear us all right now?
I can hear. It's just hard at times when people don't speak.
Especially with our mask is on.
Yeah, masks really muffle things. My apologies.
that's one. Policy and bylaw review,
Nothing for me.
that's good. Public Works and Community Facilities. Myself and Councillor Defoe.
Nothing for me.
Village Services and Liaison.
I do have some reports, but would you rather I give them at the committee of the whole or at the regular meeting?
It's your choice.
I'll wait then.
Protective Services, myself and Councillor Coomber.
No.
Intergovernmental Relations, myself and Councillor Coomber. Emergency Preparedness and Select Committee, Councillor Coomber and Councillor Peters.
I was just wondering, we put out an ad in our local paper for contractors.
We did.
And is that the only place it was advertised was locally?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
And on Facebook.
And on Facebook. And did we get many responses?
Excuse me, we got one for the info center, the same operator who's done it.
Oh,
for
I was
the past
talking
month.
about emergency preparedness.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, that's what the.
Yeah, so we had put it in the late in 2020, or in November, I believe, October or November, we put an ad in the paper asking for people to register with the office if they had equipment that they thought could be used for village contracts or emergency situations.
Yes, and I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it was around half a dozen.
Okay.
And there were not quite all of those, 4 or 5 out of those half a dozen or so said that they would be available depending on their contracts for emergency response as well.
Okay. Just knowing what the challenges were during Frechette in 2020, if we hadn't had an out-of-town company here doing other works that we shanghaied, we would have been in quite dire circumstances. So it's very important that we have as many listed as we possibly can.
On that line, if you were finished, there's something I wanted to possibly bring up. Since we're committee of the whole, this is a little more informal. I got an email from Sarah Simon, who works for Flynn. I won't try to say all of that out. They have made some changes to the, I don't know whether it's just to the model or whether it's to their gauges or what, but they have made improvements to the flood forecasting for the Bonaparte River. She did not mention in her email whether anything had been done for the Cache Creek, but there will be a meeting to go through the new information on, I believe it's February 18th, that Thursday anyway.
Will we be involved in that?
That's why I'm bringing it up. So far as myself and Alana Peters and anybody else on council who wants to sit in, it will be most likely, it is a It's either a Skype or a Zoom meeting, I'm not sure which.
If it's government, it'll be Skype because they won't use Zoom.
Okay. I wasn't a Zoom fan at first either, but they've upped their game quite
It's
a
so
bit.
easy to use, yeah. So that was the,
What time, do you know?
3 p.m. I believe.
you'll send an email out to council?
I can do that, yep.
Thank you.
That will be exciting.
So how many, I missed the number of contractors who submitted their.
I don't have a number off
Oh,
the top of my
just
head.
roughly.
This is a guesstimate, roughly half a dozen, maybe a few more. And of those, there's probably 2 or 3 that did not, but the majority did say that they would be able to help out during an emergency, provided, depending on what their other contracts were like.
That's the big challenge, and the reason we need numerous contractors listed is that was part of our problem, was that we had a number of our contractors that we normally use that weren't available. And so it was a struggle.
So how many, you were talking about the contractor ads for the travel info center and the janitor, how many did we get for that?
Okay, that would be probably back under a different one, probably
Oh.
those services liaison, but I can certainly discuss it. We only had one applicant for the visitor info center. It was the same person who's managed it for the last 3 or 4 years. And she does an excellent job and goes above and beyond, literally, because she does stuff that's outside of her contract that helps us out a lot. So we're lucky to have her.
Nothing for the cleaning services?
There were 2 submissions for that one, and I have not made a decision on that one. I want to talk it over more thoroughly with Christina, but she's totally focused on the audit right now, so I'm going to have to talk to those 2 contractors. But one of them, there was a substantial difference in the monthly rate that they were charging. So I want to have a discussion with Christina about that. And because it is leading up to a contract that's pretty much a closed session discussion, so I can be more forthcoming in our closed session.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, can we move right into our regular meeting?
Move to adjourn committee of the whole.
Can we move into the regular meeting?
It's been advertised as 6 p.m.
6
start, so
p.m.
we pretty much have to start at 6. Sorry. I have not heard a second for the adjournment of the
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous.
Sorry, my fingers aren't working. Page 7. Sorry, Sue, go ahead.
I just have a couple on page 8, October 26th, number 1. The status is pending. I would like to see that completed as it's quite timely. As well as November 23rd. Oh, I lost it. It's page 9. November 23rd, number 2, and then would be the same. Those were both kind of timely.
Sorry, October 26th, and what was the other?
23rd, October 26th and November 23rd, the letter to Premier Horgan. On December 14th, the correspondence to Mr. Lewis. All of those are rather timely and, in my opinion, should have been dealt with. But
I think some of these things need to be updated because I know that they've been done.
And then page 10, number 3.
Sorry, I'm still looking for the one to,
Starts on page 8 and goes into page 9.
which one? Sorry, there was one from Mr. Lewis. Where's that?
So that's on
Page
page
9.
9.
Okay.
Second item down.
Oh, there we go. December 14th.
Those are all kind of timely. And then I just had a question. We gave the first reading to the business, the bylaw for cannabis. I'm just wondering what our next steps are with that. I can't remember.
The next step, because there's a zoning bylaw amendment, that needs a public hearing. The ads will be coming out in this week's paper and next week's paper. And the public hearing will be held on February 16th.
Thank you.
Once it gets to third reading, then we have to get Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to sign off on it because it's affecting properties immediately adjacent to a controlled access highway. Once they sign off on it, it comes back to us and we can adopt.
Thank you. That's it for me.
CAO on page 8, the right at the bottom of the page, quarterly billing, utility charges.
Oh, yeah.
Has that been
That's done.
initiated?
Oh, yes, that should be marked as complete. Missed that one. That is complete.
I have that one. There's 2. So.
And on page 11, the community foundation fund, did we get the grant from NDIT, do you know?
We did. We just actually today received the receipt from the Interior Foundation showing that they had received that $50,000.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Great answer, right?
Doot, doot. Yeah.
Any further? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Committee reports, economic development, Councillor Peters and Councillor Kumber.
No meeting, no report.
Nothing from me.
Budget and Administrative Services, Councillor Peters and Councillor Kumber.
I have nothing there from me.
Policy and bylaw review, myself and Councillor Peters.
Just our next meeting for the working group is next week or the week after? I can't remember.
I believe it's next week.
And we'll be discussing the a proposed bylaw for the agreement between the villages bylaw or policy to be brought back to the villages for approval that will lay out kind of the guts of the agreement. So who's responsible for what, time frames, those kinds of things.
Setting up budgets and timeline for doing that.
Yeah.
Withdrawal from the agreement and how long we're all going to be locked in for, at least at the beginning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that will come to council within the next month.
Public Works and Community Facilities, myself and Councillor Defoe.
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you. Request from Mr. Fair regarding the relocation of the memorial bench to the Cache Creek Park.
So moved. I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Councillor Peters, second. Okay. Discussion?
Would the village be part of moving that, or would that be the Fair family responsibility?
I don't know what our current policy is. It would follow our current policy as if we had just received a brand new bench for a new request.
And I would also ask whether the Fair family have been in contact with the golf course about that. They're the owners of the golf course about, because they'll have to get access to get it removed.
That wouldn't be our responsibility. Okay. He's making a request to relocate it to our park.
Yeah, okay.
I believe there's something in the cover letter about with the closure of the golf course and the sale of it, that the bench was removed at that time, but...
No, it says the golf course was closed and we would like to place, oh, maybe it doesn't,
Yeah, I'm reading between the lines. with
yeah.
Well, do we have a place to put it? That's the question. So if you could look into that and do the logistical end of things.
Yeah, there are plenty of locations where we could put it. I would like to discuss that with Mr. Fair and figure out what works for all parties.
Valuable members of our community.
All in favor? Village Services and Liaison, Councillor Defoe and Councillor Coomber.
I have had lots of meetings in the past few weeks. The last Health Action Wellness Committee meeting, we heard from Interior Health that the lab analyzer was removed on December 16th because of lack of staff and it was over 10 years old. And that was behind their decision to go with point of care testing. They said about 85% of tests can be done with point of care testing. Currently, there are tests that already go to Kamloops for the results, so that's nothing new. And they're going to be using it Monday to Friday for outpatients. And regarding the emergency room, they told us that between Monday and Friday, that would have been back the second week of January. They had 22 visits to ER and 18 of those they said were low priority. And I can tell you firsthand, when I was there on Saturday, it was quite busy and they weren't low priority cases. There were ambulance visits and potential heart attacks and a few other things. Luckily, they had full lab service, x-rays and blood work that day. I think we'd be in dire straits without our emergency room. Hat Creek Ranch, they're asking the Heritage Branch to extend the contract for 2 more years, when the contract was reallocated a year ago. The Heritage Branch said the Friends of Hat Creek Society could have 2 years and a possible 2 years afterwards. So they've got 1 year left in the contract and they're asking the Heritage Branch to make a decision on those last 2 years. And no decision yet how the ranch will open to the public this year, but they're talking about possibly just doing the restaurant and the patio area, maybe the gift shop. They really haven't come to a decision yet. And that's my report.
Thank you. Anything further under Protective Services?
I have a report for Protective Services from the Thompson Flood Advisory Committee. Fraser Basin Council and the BGC Engineering submitted a $2.5 million application to the National Disaster Mitigation Program to continue flood mapping of select areas within the Thompson River watershed. In our area, 11 kilometers of the Bonaparte River from the Bonaparte Reserve to Cache Creek is included in that. 7 kilometers of the Thompson River near Ashcroft and 7 kilometers of Thompson River at Spence's Bridge. Fraser Basin Council has coordinated a collaborative approach since late 2017. Flood risk assessment, base level flood mapping, LIDAR data, and ortho imagery has been captured for much of the Thompson River watershed and other portions of Caribou and Columbia regions and they're just working at filling in the gaps. That was submitted, I think, the first week of January, so they haven't heard back on whether their application has been accepted. Yeah.
That's awesome.
May I get a copy of your report before we close for the evening? Thank you.
Thank you. Any further?
No, I haven't.
Thank you. Intergovernmental relations, myself and Councillor Coomber. The recommendation that council receive and file a letter from MLAs, Bolivar, Tigard, etc., etc.
So moved.
Second. Discussion.
Just a comment, I'm glad they're following through on that, having personally been involved with having to travel to Kelowna. The physical and emotional, not to mention the financial toll, is considerable. And I hope that they follow through on their promise.
All in favor? Carried. And just a brief outline of our teleconference with Minister Osborne. I guess the highlight of the conference, teleconference, is basically that the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, and the administration of such will start to flow late February, but it doesn't look like it'll hit our area till the fall of 2021. That's it for me. Any further? Landfill Advisory Committee, myself and Councillor Cooper, we have the pleasure.
Mayor Tallarico, Jack Jays, and myself met with Megan Powers and Chirag Patel at the Campbell Hill landfill on January 19th to do the first of 4 inspections. There wasn't a whole lot going on and not a lot to inspect at that time. We used to do these weekly, but right now we're doing them quarterly. So we were looking at things such as the entrance signage, scale signage, different various other signage, safety, fencing, security gates, appearance and cleanliness, weigh scales. Any rodents observed? No. Birds? No. It was nice to see that there's garbage there again. It was an interesting tour of the new landfill, and but yeah, just to do an inspection, it was good. I think we were all pretty happy with it.
Thank you. It was an experience. Information correspondence. None. None. New business. Questions from the public. Questions from the press.
Yes, hello. I just want to confirm the quarterly billings have started going out because I noticed something on the Cache Creek Village Facebook page saying that a number had been returned as incorrect address. So this is the first of the quarterly billings, correct? Okay. And also just a query on the CAO's report. The footbridge lighting, it was my understanding from the last meeting that that has been complete. It's no longer pending. The first batch of lighting was vandalized, but it's since been replaced and is in working order.
That is correct. Was that still on that status report?
It's on page 7, February 24th.
Oh, for crying out loud, so it is. Okay. Now that one could be removed.
Okay, thank you. That was all I had.
Motion moved into closed.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.